Have you ever been told you didn't belong somewhere not because you were wrong, but because someone else decided who should belong? Have you ever sat in silence, your heart pounding, knowing that if you spoke, the world might finally see you or turn against you? Imagine this: a black woman, a successful CEO, steps onto a first-class flight she paid for, only to be told, "Ma'am, this seat isn't yours." In that single moment, every achievement, every degree, every barrier she broke erased by a stranger's doubt. 90 seconds later, the entire first class would never be the same again. What would you do in those 90 seconds? Would you fight back, or sit still and let silence speak for you? Because sometimes silence doesn't mean surrender. It means power. The kind of power that forces the world to look at itself and ask, who are we really? When no one is watching. This isn't just a story about discrimination. It's about dignity, about the strength it takes to stay seated when the world tells you to stand down, about how one woman's quiet defiance changed an entire system. So, before we begin, take a breath. Picture yourself in that seat, and ask, what would you do if the world doubted your right to exist where you've already earned your place? If this story touches you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because what happens next will change how you see silence forever. The airport loudspeaker blared softly through the crowd. Aurea Air Flight 982 bound for San Francisco, beginning boarding for first-class passengers. Dr. Maya Trent pulled a small silver-gray suitcase through the bright white hallway. Her black flats clicked lightly on the floor, making a steady, deep, confident sound. She wore a sand-brown blazer, her hair pulled back into a bun, and her white shirt collar was slightly unbuttoned. Nothing flashy, nothing trying to look like a CEO. She was used to being wrong, not the first time. The 42-year-old black woman was successful, but she was often mistaken for an assistant or a hitchhiker. Maya thought she was used to it, until that cold voice rang out, just as she reached the first-class row. "Excuse me, ma'am, are you sure you're in the right place?" It was Karen Hale, the head stewardess. Her face was stern, her smile thin, her eyes glancing down at the ticket in Maya's hand as if searching for a loophole. Maya looked up and said softly, "Yes, seat 2A. Karen frowned slightly. "Can I see your boarding pass and ID?" Maya handed them both over. Everything was correct: QR code, name, ticket class Aurea Platinum. Karen glanced quickly, then looked at Maya again. Her eyes filled with undisguised suspicion. "Thanks. I just wanted to make sure. Sometimes mistakes happen." The words were spoken softly, but loud enough for the people sitting next to him to hear. A man with gray hair raised his eyebrows slightly. A young girl looked at her phone, looking annoyed. Maya just nodded, a thin smile in response. She had learned that sometimes a smile was the only way to counteract an insult. She put her bag in the overhead compartment and sat down in seat 2A. The seat back was soft. The smell of genuine leather and jazz music played faintly from the cabin speakers. Everything seemed peaceful until Karen returned. "Ma'am, it seems the system is showing that seat 2A is reserved for another passenger. A businessman from Boston," Karen said, her voice polite, but her eyes cold. "Are you sure this isn't a mistake?" Maya placed her hands on her lap and took a deep breath. "No, I'm sure." Her voice was deep and clear, neither high nor low. "I'm the one who bought this chair." Karen smiled faintly. "Just to be sure. I'll check with the ground office. Do you mind?" "No," Maya said. She looked out the window. Outside, the sky was starting to darken, the sunset washing the wings of the plane in a warm orange. A small drop of water rolled down the glass, reflecting the light, as if the sky were whispering something. Memories flooded her mind. More than 30 years ago, her mother, Linda Trent, had been a flight attendant. Back then, she said, people said you weren't white enough to fly first class, not classy enough to be in first class. Maya was 12 when she first heard those words. She remembered her mother's face after the long flight, the sad eyes, the hoarse voice, and the forced smile as she said, "It'll be different, honey." But, as it turns out, there's not much difference. It's just the way people use words that's different. Karen returned after a few minutes. "Ma'am, I've contacted the ground. There may be a system error. May I have your boarding pass for verification?" she said, holding out her hand. Maya looked down at the ticket in her hand, the one that clearly read Dr. Maya Trent. She shook her head. "I want to keep it. Ma'am, this is just a formality. I will return it as soon as Maya interrupted. I understand, but I will keep it." The atmosphere was heavy. The back row began to stir. One man said softly, "Oh my gosh, it's just a ticket." Another took a picture with his phone, presumably to share online. Karen stood still. Less than 2 feet between her and Maya. They seemed like two different worlds, one in control of the moment, one holding her dignity in silence. Maya looked up. Her voice was so soft that only Karen could hear it. "I don't need to prove anything." Karen pursed her lips. She turned away and walked quickly out of the cabin, her high heels clicking loudly on the floor. The air in the cabin seemed to cool several degrees. Maya leaned back in her seat, staring up at the ceiling of the cabin, where the dim LED strip cast a soft white glow. She closed her eyes, counting her breaths. 1, 2, 3. It wasn't the first time she'd been questioned, but this was different. She wasn't the girl in her 20s waiting for an apology. She was the head of a data security company that protected millions of users from fraud and privacy violations. And now people were questioning her simply because she didn't look like a first-class passenger. There was a fire burning inside Maya, not anger, but sadness mixed with a clear sense of strength. She didn't need to shout. She didn't need to argue. She just needed to wait. A young flight attendant walked up, looking confused. "Ma'am, are you okay? I'm Ben Carter." Maya opened her eyes, looked at him, and smiled. "I'm fine. Thank you." Ben hesitated. "She's a little stubborn sometimes. Not everyone. It's okay." Maya interrupted. "You don't have to explain." At that moment, the loudspeaker announced, "The plane door will close in 2 minutes. Prepare for takeoff." Maya picked up the laptop and opened it gently. On the screen appeared the words, "Horizon Shield Security. Live System." A file was already open. Emergency Protocol Access, Level Red. She stared at the screen for a few seconds, then closed it. Her gaze turned to the window, where dusk had given way to darkness. A long flight was beginning, and Maya knew it would be a restless night. In first class, one wrong word can change everything, and sometimes all it takes is one woman to keep silent, for the whole world to listen. The Aria Air first-class cabin was bathed in warm, dim light, but the air was strangely tense. Dr. Maya Trent sat in seat 2A, back straight, hands resting lightly on her thighs. Every breath she took was deliberate. She knew all eyes were on her, some curious, some annoyed, and the most hated pitying ones. She said nothing. Her silence was like a glass wall. Karen Hale, the chief stewardess, remained at the end of the aisle, talking to the pilot on a small radio. Her voice was tense and cold. Maya couldn't make out the words, but she was smart enough to understand they were checking her identity. A middle-aged man sitting in row 3B leaned slightly and said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "I guess she must have a fake ticket." "There are so many tricks these days," a woman next to him replied, her voice soft but bitter. She must think that just by dressing nicely she can get into first class. Maya didn't turn around. She stared into the distance, the light reflecting off her dark brown eyes, making them seem as deep as the surface of a lake. An old saying from her mother echoed in her mind. You can't teach someone respect by yelling. You have to make them realize they're wrong. She still remembered that day in her small apartment in Atlanta. Her mother, Linda Trent, put her stewardess cap down on the table and said hoarsely, "You know, today they told me to stand in the back because the passengers were uncomfortable with seeing a black man serving in first class." Maya was only 12, and the words were seared into her mind. Today, 30 years later, she heard them again in her head, but this time the voice didn't hurt. It calmed her. Karen approached, her high heels clicking steadily. She tried to keep her voice professional. "Dr. Trent, we're still checking with the ground office. It should only be a few minutes. I appreciate your cooperation." Maya nodded slightly. I cooperated. Karen paused for a beat. There was no argument, no resistance, just a calmness that was disconcerting. A few passengers began filming. A faint clicking sound could be heard. Maya knew they were filming, but she didn't care. She didn't try to hide it. She just kept quiet. Silence wasn't surrender. It was choice. She knew, in this day and age, there was nothing more powerful than the image of someone who didn't need to scream to stop a room. Ben Carter, the young flight attendant, stood behind Karen, his eyes fidgeting. He was about 26, tall, thin, with light brown hair. He looked at Maya with a mixture of pity and admiration. When Karen turned away, Ben bowed slightly and whispered, "Would you like some water?" Dr. Trent Maya looked at him, smiling thinly. "Thank you, I'm fine." Ben nodded, stepping back. His eyes said what words could not, "I see what's happening, and I know it's wrong." Outside the window, New York was fading into darkness. The lights of the buildings reflected off the glass. For a moment, Maya saw her own reflection in the window frame, a black woman in a world of metal and light. It was both beautiful and sad. She pulled out her phone, opened her email, and saw an unread message from Dominic Ray, CTO of Horizon Shield. The subject line, "System upgrade complete, red protocol ready." She read it without clicking open. Not now, not the kind of power she wanted to wield. Karen turned back again. Her voice was a little urgent now, ma'am. "I just confirmed that your name is not on the system's first-class passenger list. You may have been downgraded to business class." A wave of murmurs spread through the cabin. "I knew it," someone exclaimed. Another chuckled. Maya looked up, her gaze straight ahead. "I bought this ticket 3 weeks ago. I paid with my corporate card. I have the confirmation, the email, the receipt, and I am sitting right where I belong." Her voice was not high, not trembling, but each word seemed to fall into the air, heavy and clear. Karen paused slightly, then replied, "I understand, but until I receive confirmation from the ground department, I cannot let you stay here." A long silence. Maya smiled softly, not a sarcastic smile, but an almost sad one. "Are you telling me to get off this chair?" Karen inhaled. "Just temporarily. We'll find you somewhere else." "Somewhere else," Maya repeated. "Where business?" Just a few rows back. Maya didn't move. She looked at Karen, her eyes so still that Karen found herself avoiding her gaze. "I'll sit here," Maya said softly, "until you're sure you're right." Her voice was even, no louder than a whisper, but enough to make Ben, who was closest, swallow. Something about the way she spoke muffled the sounds in the cabin. Karen clenched her fists on the notepad, then turned and walked quickly toward the galley. Maya closed her eyes. In the darkness behind her eyelids, she could hear her heart beating, slow and strong. There was no anger, only determination. Part of her wanted to stand up, to say that she was the CEO of the company that designed the security software running on this very plane. But she didn't. Not because she was afraid, but because she wanted them to face the truth that sometimes what we fear isn't power, but the silence of the person who has it. She remembered the meeting last week when Dominic said, "We have completed the emergency authentication system," with just one voice command. "All cabin data will be recorded in 90 seconds. She laughed and replied, "I hope I never have to use it." Now, sitting here, she thought differently. Maybe the time would come. Maya opened her eyes and looked around. The cabin was quiet. The people who had been whispering now avoided her eyes. Their silence now spoke louder than words. The loudspeaker blared, the pilot's voice. "Ladies and gentlemen, we will be taking off in 5 minutes. Please return to your seats and fasten your seat belts." Karen turned back, a wry smile on her face. "Ma'am, I'll let you sit here until we have more information. But if the ground confirms an error, I'll expect your cooperation." Maya nodded. "Of course." Karen left. Ben stood still, glanced at Maya one last time, as if he wanted to say something, but then stopped. As the plane began to move, a soft blue light slid across the cabin. Maya tilted her head to look out. The city below was shrinking, lights on lights like an electric circuit. She took a deep breath and said softly to herself, "Everything has its limits, even silence." The words were drowned out by the roar of the engine. No one heard them, but the look in Maya's eyes had changed. Behind the calmness was a wave waiting to be named. In the next few hours, the world will learn that sometimes all it takes is one woman to be silent at the right time for the whole system to listen. The plane began to climb. The cabin lights dimmed. The engine hum was steady, a metallic lullaby. "Doctor," Maya Trent leaned back, eyes fixed straight ahead. She knew it wasn't over. Karen Hale, the chief flight attendant, remained in the forward section, occasionally glancing in her direction, her eyes searching. Ben Carter walked over and gently placed the glass of water on the table. He whispered, "If you need anything, just call me." Maya nodded, thanking him with her eyes. She understood that, between people who only saw what they wanted to see, sometimes a small gesture like that could make people feel a little less cold. She sipped the cool water. Every time she drank, she could see her reflection in the glass. A black woman, dressed simply, her face calm but her eyes heavy. Two emotions were running through her. One part wanted to let it go. The other part wanted to stop, to end the cycle of checking to be sure. Karen's voice rang out, low but loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. "Central, I need to confirm passenger name Maya Trent, seat number 2A, first class. It seems there was a data entry error." She paused, listening to the other side's response, then replied more urgently, "I know, but I need to verify right away. It seems she's using a premium ticket that the system isn't accepting." A man in row 3B sneered again. "See, I knew something was wrong." A woman sitting next to him smiled wryly. They don't understand that sometimes prejudice is so deep that it comes out through seemingly harmless smiles. Maya said nothing. She opened her laptop and tapped the keyboard, the blue light of the screen illuminating her face. The screen displayed the logo for Horizon Shield, the data security software she had created. She typed a few words, but didn't send them. She just wanted to feel in control again, the feeling she had once believed she had the power to maintain. In the cabin. Karen turned around and stood in front of Maya. "Ma'am, the ground office said they couldn't find any transactions with your name on the list today. Maybe the payment card is faulty." Maya raised her head, her voice calm. "And what do you think that means?" Karen let out a small breath, trying to control herself. "I think we need to double-check. Could you stand up and follow me to the business class area while we wait for verification?" "No," Maya answered simply, her voice not high or shaky. "I will sit here, because this is my seat." Karen blushed slightly. "I'm trying to keep you out of trouble. If the system determines you're not first class, you could be forced off the plane. Do you understand?" Maya looked at her, her eyes sharp but calm. "You're saying I should leave my seat, not because I did anything wrong, but because you believe the system is more right than I am." Karen was silent. Ben stood silently behind her for a moment, his eyes moving between the two women. He saw something Karen didn't restrain. A small ding sounded from the intercom. Karen listened, then nodded, turned around and said quickly, "Excuse me." She left, her boots clicking on the metal floor. Maya watched, her lips pursed. She knew this was going further than it was worth, but she also knew that if she left her chair now, all they would see was another familiar image, a black woman who was being coy to avoid trouble, and she had lived with that image for too long. Ben turned back, his voice low. "Do you want me to tell her I saw your ticket?" Maya shook her head slightly. "No need. Thank you. Sometimes the truth speaks for itself." He was silent. Maya closed her eyes. A memory flashed through her mind the first time she was invited to speak at a national technology conference. The MC had introduced her with a line that drew laughter. "It's amazing that a black woman could lead a leading data security company." Maya just smiled and replied, "It's amazing that people still find that amazing." Tonight, on this flight, she was in the same place as before between surprise and disbelief. The loudspeaker announced, "We are flying at 31,000 feet. The outside temperature is 12 degrees F." Karen turned back, this time with a man in uniform who appeared to be a supervisor. He held a tablet, the light from the screen reflecting off his stern face. "Excuse me." "Ma'am, this is George Lynn, in charge of flight security. There is an anomaly in the passenger list. I need to confirm your ID again." Maya handed over the card, this time without saying anything. He scanned the code. The screen flashed, then stopped at the red text, "Access restricted." George was surprised. "Access denied." Karen looked at him, her voice low. Maybe she's using locked information. Maya's lips curled slightly. You should be careful what you say." George looked back at the screen. "Miss Trent, where do you work Horizon Shield Security?" He paused. "A data security company working with the FAA." Maya nodded. "Yes, and I am the founder." Both Karen and George were silent. Karen took a half step back, trying to hide her embarrassment. I don't know." Maya looked straight at her. "No one asked you to know, but when you suspect someone, at least make sure it's not because they don't look like the person you think should be there." The cabin fell silent. Ben stared, his eyes wide. Karen pursed her lips, trying to find words but finding none. George put the tablet back down on the table. "Dr. Trent, I apologize for the inconvenience. I'll take care of it so you can rest in peace." Maya nodded. "I don't need an apology. I just need you to do the right thing." George bowed his head, then turned away. Karen remained standing there, her face a mixture of confusion and shame. She was about to say something, but Maya raised her hand, gently. No need to say more. Maya turned to the window. Below, the clouds were thick and black as velvet. The moonlight shimmered. She looked down at her hands and saw that they were clenched. She released them, breathing deeply. Ben approached, his voice low. "Are you okay?" She looked at him and smiled. "Have you ever wondered why people are afraid of silence?" Ben frowned. "Because it makes them listen to themselves." Maya nodded slightly. "Yes." The announcement came back, the captain's voice. "We will be entering light turbulence for a few minutes. Please fasten your seat belts." Karen turned back to her seat, not looking at Maya anymore. She tied her belt, her eyes downcast, as if trying to escape the gaze of the person she had suspected. Maya leaned her head back, eyes fixed on the ceiling of the cabin, lips pursed. She knew this wasn't over. There was more to come, but she wasn't afraid. She'd been through too many tests in her life. Tests no one asked for, but she always passed. She whispered softly, just enough for herself to hear, "They don't know. There are many things they don't know." The plane glided through the clouds, the wind whistling softly outside, inside the cabin. All was quiet, but inside Maya, an undercurrent was building, slow and steady. The wave had not yet broken, but when it did, no one would be able to stand still. The sky outside was pitch black, save for a few faint streaks of light peeking through the clouds. Inside the first-class cabin, the ceiling lights had turned a soft, warm tone. The atmosphere seemed to have calmed down after the awkward examination, but Dr. Maya Trent could clearly sense an unnatural silence. It wasn't peace, but the calm before the storm. Karen Hale sat in the crew seat near the door, occasionally checking her tablet. Despite being told by Flight Security Supervisor George Lynn not to make a big deal out of it, she couldn't shake the uneasy feeling. Questions were running through her head. If the woman was indeed the CEO of Horizon Shield, why hadn't the airline system recognized her name? Little did she know. That question was about to get an answer, and it would shake the entire cabin. Maya opened her laptop, the light illuminating her deep, calm eyes. She quickly typed in a few commands, checking the status of Horizon Sentinel, a security protocol her company had partnered with Aurea Air to install on a trial basis. Its purpose was to monitor the safety of internal data on commercial flights. She had intended it to be a quick check, but as soon as the words "system integrity compromised" appeared, her heart sank. She whispered, almost inaudibly, "Impossible." She tried the command again. Same result. The cabin network was being tampered with. Passenger data and first-class manifests had been altered just minutes before boarding, and the command hadn't come from the ground office. Maya leaned back in her chair, her fingers tapping the edge of the keyboard. Possibilities raced through her mind. Someone had tried to remove her from the list. Maybe out of prejudice, maybe out of some other motive, but it was definitely intentional. Ben Carter walked by, a look of concern in his eyes. "Are you okay, Dr. Trent?" Maya looked at him, smiling slightly. "Ben, if something strange happened to the cabin system, what would you do first?" Ben paused. "Probably tell the flight attendant. And if that person is the one who doesn't believe you," Ben was silent. Maya nodded slightly. "Sometimes what we need to report isn't on the checklist." She looked back at the screen. Now, a new line appeared: unauthorized override detected. Cabin network level 2. Her heart was pounding. Someone was accessing the cabin control data. If true, it was more than just erasing her name. They were trying to alter the flight security system's control logs. That, according to aviation law, was a federal crime. She took a deep breath, then said softly to herself, "They don't know what they're touching." Karen stood up and approached Maya, her voice softer but still firm. "Trent, I want to apologize for earlier. There may have been a technical error, but everything is fine now." Maya looked up, her voice calm. "What do you mean? Okay?" Karen paused slightly. "I mean, the system confirmed your name, but it seems." Maya looked straight ahead. "Seems like what it seems to only be restored after a deleted file is restored. I'm not sure who did it, but..." Before Karen could finish, the cabin ceiling screen suddenly flashed. A line of white text appeared on a black background: "Cabin audit protocol engaged." A soft alarm sounded. George Lynn jumped up and picked up the walkie-talkie. "What's going on? Who activated the audit protocol?" Maya closed her eyes. She said nothing. There was no need to say anything. Karen looked around. Bewildered, "I didn't do anything, I was just..." An electronic voice came over the internal speaker. Deep and clear: "Audit sequence initiated. Cabin communications temporarily suspended. Duration 90 seconds. The entire first-class cabin fell into complete silence. No internet, no intercom, no communication signal, just the hum of the system." Karen looked around, gasping. "What is going on? Who turned this on?" George leaned over the subconsole, confusion evident in his eyes. "This protocol is not under our control. It is a test installation of Horizon Shield." His eyes turned to Maya. "Miss Trent, did you know about this?" Maya looked at him, her eyes calm to the point of being unreadable. "This is an automated system. It only activates if it detects unauthorized interference with the cabin control data." Karen took a step back. "What do you mean?" "I mean, someone did something they shouldn't have done. During those 90 seconds, all internal cameras, location sensors, and security panels automatically recorded everything. Every touch on the screen, every access command was logged, and that data, by design, was sent directly to Aurea Air and Horizon Shield headquarters." Ben stood still, eyes wide. You triggered it." Maya did not reply. She only said softly, "Sometimes justice does not need to be shouted. It just needs to be recorded." Karen turned to George, her voice faltering. "What should we do? Will we be punished?" George shook his head, but his eyes were heavy. "If someone did tamper with the system, There will be a federal investigation. Outside, the plane continued to glide across the night sky. Inside, everyone was silent. Some started filming videos. Others just sat there, holding their breath. When the audit complete chime sounded, the system rebooted. The ceiling display read, "All crew activity logged. Report dispatched to headquarters." Karen stood there, frozen. Her face was white. They'll see it all. Even the parts where George didn't look at her, just nodded. Everything, even what you said. Ben looked at Maya with a mixture of awe and fear. "You just rocked the whole company." Maya smiled slightly. "No, I just sat in my seat." Karen turned away, her voice trembling. "You don't understand. You just put us all under scrutiny." Maya replied softly. "There are things that need to be looked at, Karen, and sometimes the only way to stop injustice is to shine a light on it." The cabin was dead silent. Only the breathing and rapid heartbeats of those who knew that, in the past 90 seconds. The entire truth had been recorded once and for all. The plane continued its journey, the cabin lights gradually returning. Everyone was still silent, but it was no longer a silence of doubt. It was a silence of awareness. Dr. Maya Trent leaned her head back slightly, closing her eyes. She felt not triumph, but quiet sadness. She knew the video would spread, would be edited, commented on, argued about. But she also knew that someone would see themselves in it, someone who had been looked down upon, who had been asked, "Are you sure you're in the right place?" And when they saw it, they would understand why she hadn't left seat 2A. In the night sky, the moonlight shone through the window, reflecting a soft light on her face. It was not the light of victory, but the light of someone who knew that silence at the right time could change an entire system. After the audit ended, the Aurea air cabin felt different. No more whispers, no more murmurs of doubt, just a silence that seemed to swallow what had just happened. Dr. Maya Trent sat in seat 2A, calm as if nothing was surprising, but inside, her heart was still beating slowly but steadily, a reminder that things had taken a turn that could not be reversed. Karen Hale, the chief flight attendant, stood frozen in the aisle. Her face was pale, her hands shaking slightly. She had never seen that protocol activated before. She knew the airline's internal audit system, but what had appeared was not controlled by the airline. It was an automated, independent system, and the source was clearly marked on the screen Horizon Sentinel. George Lynn, the flight security supervisor, stepped forward, his voice low and heavy. "The entire file has just been sent. None of us have the authority to delete or edit it. This is now beyond my control." He looked at Maya, his eyes a mixture of respect and suspicion. "Dr. Trent, did you know this was going to happen?" Maya looked at him, her voice soft. "I don't know, but I know what happens when people try to hide the truth." Ben Carter, the young flight attendant, remained nearby. His gaze on Maya was no longer one of admiration, but of something else, a new understanding of the power of composure. Karen whispered, her voice hoarse, "You turned everything, including me." Maya was silent. Karen took a step forward, slightly choked. "Do you know this will cost me my job?" Maya looked at her, her eyes neither angry nor pitying. "Karen, I didn't make you lose your job. Your choice did." The words were like a knife blade passing through the thin glass between them. Karen turned away. Her eyes filled with tears, but she did not dare to react. George motioned for her to sit down. Outside, the plane was still gliding through the clouds. On the personal screens, the words "audit report" uploaded successfully were still flashing. Some passengers began whispering, and some took out their phones to record the screen. Someone whispered, "I've never seen anything like this in my life." Maya leaned her head back, staring up at the ceiling of the cabin. She remembered her early years when her company was looked down upon because her team was predominantly women of color. "We don't need to shout to prove ourselves right," she had said in a meeting. "Let the data do it." Now, that principle had become a mirror for the entire system. A soft voice came on the loudspeaker. The captain's voice, deep and professional. "Ladies and gentlemen, we will be descending in about an hour. Please remain calm and cooperate throughout the flight." Maya knew that voice. Captain Harold Beckett. He had attended the security conference where she had presented on Horizon Sentinel. She could tell he knew what was going on, but he chose to speak neutrally. Karen bowed her head and said nothing. George sat down on a chair near the door, his hands clutching the walkie-talkie. Ben looked around, then approached Maya. "I don't understand. How can you be so calm?" Maya looked at him, her eyes deep and calm. "Because I lost my temper once, and I realized my anger only made them feel right." Ben swallowed. "But you know what people will say. They will edit. They will comment. They will blame." "Yes," Maya chuckled, her voice a breath. "But they will see it too. And when they do, they will think of the times they were doubted just for being themselves." George stood up and approached. "I've received a confirmation message from the central office. Miss Trent, they have confirmed your identity and high-level access. I apologize for everything." Maya nodded, not looking at him. "You don't need to apologize to me, Mr. Lynn. The system did what it had to do." Karen stood up, her voice choked. "What about me?" Maya turned. "You are human, Karen, and humans have a chance to learn again." The cabin fell silent again. This time, the silence was not cold, but of recognition. Maya gently opened her laptop and looked at the status line, which had changed to secure. She saw the last message report delivered to Horizon HQ, flagged for review discrimination-based security breach. She closed the computer and leaned her head back. Sometimes justice comes not with a siren, but with a well-timed click. As the plane descended, the city lights began to appear in the distance like golden veins. Maya looked out the window and smiled. There would be noise, newspapers, social media, hashtags, debates, but she wasn't afraid. Because finally, the truth had been told, even if it was only in 90 seconds of silence. Ben sat nearby and asked in a low voice, "Do you regret it?" Maya shook her head slightly. "No. There are moments when, if no one stops, things will never change. But people might see you as a troublemaker." She laughed, her voice slow. "If justice makes people uncomfortable, then maybe it's time they felt that way." George turned back, his eyes softening. "Miss Trent, when we get back to San Francisco, there will be a federal investigation team meeting the plane. They will want to talk to you." "I know," she said softly, "and I will. But not to get revenge, but to make them understand why a system needs to be audited, even if it thinks it's perfect." Karen looked up and said in a small voice, "You don't want me to lose my job, so what do you want?" Maya looked at her, her eyes softening. "I want you to remember this moment. The next time you feel like doubting someone, think about whether it was your mother, your daughter, or yourself. If you can look at them that way and still feel right, then do it. If not, shut up and listen. Karen was speechless, her eyes blurred, and she turned away, trying to hide her tears. The plane descended, the engine noise gradually fading. The city of San Francisco gradually appeared through the window. Below, the shimmering lights stretched out like electric circuits glowing in the darkness. Maya looked out, her heart strangely at peace. Not because she had won, but because she knew she was in the right place. Seat 2A, the seat the world had told her she shouldn't sit in, now became a symbol of what she had pursued all her life: dignity. In those 90 seconds, one silent woman made the whole system speak, and when the truth speaks, no one can ignore it anymore. Morning light began to filter through the windows as Aria Air Flight 982 descended toward San Francisco. In first class, the air was tense but still. A strange silence, as if everyone was waiting to see what would happen next. The steady hum of the engines, the reflection of light on the leather seats, the faint smell of coffee wafting from the galley. Everything seemed normal, but everyone knew, after those 90 seconds, nothing would be the same again. Doctor, Maya Trent looked out the window, her eyes on the horizon where the blue sky was lightening. She didn't smile, didn't think, just breathed quietly. There was no anger in her anymore, just a heaviness, a mix of weariness and the realization that sometimes, for a system to change, someone has to stand still and let it collapse. Ben Carter walked over with a tray of water. "Would you like some coffee?" "Doctor." Trent Maya looked up, her voice soft. "I think I need it." He placed the cup of coffee in front of her. As he turned away, Maya whispered, "Ben." He stopped. "Thank you for standing still." Ben was a little surprised. "I didn't do anything." Maya looked out the window, the light shining in her eyes making them sparkle. Sometimes standing still is a way to be on the right side. Ben didn't know what to say, so he just nodded. Something had changed inside him. He had thought that courage meant action, speaking and doing. But this morning, he understood something else. Courage also meant knowing when to be silent and when to listen. Karen Hale remained seated in the crew seat, clutching the checklist. She stared into space, her eyes sunken. She had not spoken since the audit protocol ended. No defenses, no apologies, just silence. Perhaps she was also listening, in her head, to the sounds of a moment she could no longer erase. George Lynn was still on the ground with security. His voice was hoarse as he said, "We are approaching San Francisco. Yes, I understand. Yes, she is here. No, no escort needed. I will make sure Miss Trent is escorted safely." Maya heard every word, but she didn't react. She wasn't afraid. She'd lived her whole life with prying eyes, questions hidden behind false politeness. An investigation couldn't make her tremble. If anything, it was that such things still had to happen in 2025. Captain Harold Beckett's voice came over the loudspeaker. "We'll be landing in 10 minutes. Please fasten your seat belts." Karen stood up and walked down the aisle, checking her seat belt. When she reached Maya, their eyes met. Karen paused and said softly, "I know what to expect when I land." Maya looked at her, her voice low. "I don't want you to be punished. I just want you to understand." Karen nodded slightly, her voice choked. "I understand." Light flooded through the windows as the plane descended. The cabin shook slightly. Outside, the buildings of San Francisco appeared, growing smaller and larger as the plane approached the ground. A passenger in the back row whispered to the person next to him, "She's so calm. I'd be mad." Maya heard, but only smiled faintly. She didn't want to get mad. She had seen too many people like her labeled extremists for daring to react. Today, she chose a different approach, one that made the world reflect back at her. The tires hit the runway, soft and decisive. The cabin shook for a moment, then settled. The passengers applauded faintly, an old tradition still alive. The plane slowed down and turned onto the runway toward the arrivals terminal. Ben breathed a sigh of relief. It's finally here. George checked his radio. The federal team is at gate 12. I'll accompany Miss Trent as we leave the plane. Karen looked down at her hands and muttered incoherently. Maya heard a few words. I wish I hadn't doubted you. She didn't answer. Sometimes silence is the only answer kind enough. The plane stopped. The doors opened, letting in daylight and a cool breeze from the airport. First-class passengers began to stand up and collect their luggage. Maya remained seated. She knew this moment would be filmed. Someone would be waiting with microphones, cameras, and curious eyes. Ben approached. Do you want me to come with you? Maya shook her head. No need. You've done enough. He nodded slightly, his eyes heavy. George Lynn stepped forward. Dr. Trent, we should go. Maya stood up, holding the silver-gray bag. She turned to Karen, her voice warm but firm. You will have a chance to speak again, but next time, let your words build, not tear. Karen nodded, not looking up. As Maya stepped out of the first-class cabin, the other passengers quietly moved aside. No one spoke, but their eyes told the whole story: respect, regret, and curiosity. She walked straight, her posture calm and dignified, each step moving in its own rhythm. The plane door opened. 2 federal security agents were waiting. One wore a gray suit and introduced himself. Dr. Trent. I'm Special Agent Nolan. We just want to ask you a few questions about a security incident on the flight. Maya nodded. I understand. As they walked toward the waiting room, dozens of phones were raised. Cameras followed her. No sound, no words. The image would be shared in the next few hours, and the world would start arguing. Some would call her arrogant. Some would call her brave. Some would write thousands of comments trying to figure out who was right and who was wrong. But Maya knew the most important thing wasn't whether she was right or wrong. It was that, in the end, they had listened. On a passenger's phone, the video was posted online. Black woman CEO denied first-class seat. First class melts down in 90 seconds. Hundreds of comments appeared in just minutes. One person wrote, I was in her position. Another said, if she didn't do it, no one would believe it. And amid the flood of text, one comment stood out, silence is not weakness. Sometimes, it's the only way to make the world stop. In the makeshift interrogation room, Maya sat across from the 2 agents. They asked. She answered. Not once did she duck. When Agent Nolan asked, do you intend to use that system against the airline? Maya replied simply, no, I use it to protect the truth. The interview ended after 20 minutes. When she stepped out, the sun was high in the sky. She paused, breathing deeply, feeling the salty air of San Francisco Bay. A female reporter approached, her voice trembling but full of emotion. Trent, can you say anything to the people who are following this case? Maya looked straight into the camera, her voice low but clear. Do not be silent when the truth is distorted. But if you must be silent, let your silence have weight. The words went viral within hours. By the end of the night, her 90-second silence video had been viewed 10 million times. But Maya didn't track the number. She just sat in her small hotel near the airport, window open, watching the sunset fall on the water. She took out her phone and texted Dominic. "Ray, audit confirmed. System worked." He replied after a few minutes, "I never doubted you." Maya smiled and typed back. Maybe they needed to. Outside the window, a gentle breeze blew, carrying the smell of sea salt, and somewhere, in another cabin, some black woman would slip into her first-class seat, with no one asking her if that was her seat anymore. The news broke within hours of landing. The image of Dr. Maya Trent stepping off Aurea Air Flight 982 spread across every social media platform. Headlines were ablaze: Black woman CEO denied first-class seat. 90 seconds that shook the skies, the silence that spoke louder than words. That night, her news dominated the front page of every major online newspaper. Some called her an icon. Others said she was just lucky at the right time. But no matter what anyone said, everyone knew the world had seen Maya's 90 seconds of silence. Maya sat on the couch in her San Francisco hotel room, laptop on her lap. She opened dozens of emails from news outlets, interview requests, collaboration offers, and hateful comments, but she didn't respond to any of them. On the table was a steaming cup of ginger tea, next to a stack of Horizon Shield documents. She needed time to process what was happening. The phone rang. It was Dominic Ray. His voice was deep and familiar. "I just saw the news. Maya, you know this has gotten out of hand." "I know," Maya replied calmly. "I just didn't expect it to spread so quickly." Dominic sighed. "Aria Air is in an emergency meeting with the FAA. They want to blame it on a system error, but I checked the logs, and you're right. Someone intervened to remove your name from the list." Maya was silent for a few seconds. "I guess no one is surprised." "No," Dominic said, "but what they don't know is that a copy of the data is stored on our backup server. Do you want me to publish it?" Maya looked out the window, the morning sunlight illuminating her calm face. "No, at least not yet. If we go public now, people will only see me as someone who retaliated. I want them to find out for themselves. I want them to see their system reflected back at them." There was silence on the other end of the line for a few seconds. Dominic said softly, "You always have a way of making them look at themselves." She chuckled. "I don't need to yell at anyone." There was a knock on the door. Ben Carter appeared, in uniform, but without his name tag. He smiled sheepishly. "Sorry for the surprise. I heard you were still here." Maya invited him in. "I thought you were on another flight." Ben shook his head. "I'm grounded. They said the entire crew of Flight 982 needs to be reviewed. But I'm not upset. In fact, I think I should thank you." Maya tilted her head. "Thank me for making me see things more clearly. I used to think discrimination was a thing of the past. Now I know it just changed the way it manifested." She looked at him, her eyes softening. "Ben, sometimes the best way to change is to dare to look directly at what makes you uncomfortable." Ben sat down, his voice sincere. "I told my mother about you. She watched the video and cried. She said she had never seen anyone so quiet and strong." Maya smiled slightly. Sometimes silence is the only voice they are not used to hearing. A moment later, after Ben left, Maya sat back down. The TV in the room played a special news bulletin. Alt News has just confirmed that the FAA will launch a formal investigation into the manipulation of passenger data by Aria Air. The host continued representatives from Horizon Shield, the security company founded by Dr. Maya Trent, said they will cooperate with the investigation. Meanwhile, the hashtag #HoldYourSeat has reached 40 million shares in just 24 hours. Maya turned off the TV and leaned back in her seat. She didn't create the hashtag. It started with an anonymous passenger who had filmed it on the plane. Karen Hale was there for a few seconds, a suspicious look, a steely voice. Then silence. Then the cabin blacked out, the screen reading audit active, and finally, Maya's face in the dim light, her eyes not angry, just sad and determined. The video stopped millions of people in their tracks. She turned to social media. A prominent journalist's post generated thousands of comments. I was once asked if I was sure I was in the right place. One person wrote, "Her story reminds me of the day I was kicked out of a boardroom because no one believed I was the CEO." Another said, "It's not because she's a CEO. It's because she represents all those who've been overlooked for their rightful place." Maya read each line. Her eyes warmed, but no tears fell. She did not feel happiness, but responsibility. When a story leaves the teller's hands, it no longer belongs to them. It becomes a mirror for society, and she knew. Mirrors always make people both curious and uncomfortable. The door to her room rattled slightly from the wind in the hallway. Maya stood up and walked out onto the balcony. San Francisco was still beautiful in the morning, but today it was different. Somewhere out there, thousands of people were talking about her, and she knew the hardest thing was not to get people to pay attention, but to make them listen for more than a few days. The phone rang. It was Karen Hale this time. Maya hesitated a second before answering. Karen's voice trembled. I want to apologize. You didn't need to call just to say that." "No, I have to. I watched the video again. I didn't recognize myself. I was scared, trying to prove myself right by humiliating others. And when I saw you saying nothing, I felt empty inside." Maya was silent for a few seconds. "Karen, sometimes loss is the only way people can learn again." Karen took a deep breath. "I will testify before the FAA. I will tell the truth. You don't owe me that. You owe it to yourself." There was silence on the other end of the line. Then Karen said softly, "Thank you, Dr. Trent." The call ended. Maya put the phone down on the table. In that moment, she felt a strange silence, not the silence of the end, but the silence before the beginning of a new chapter. She went back inside and turned on her computer. A new email from Dominic appeared. The FAA requested official cooperation. They'll hold a press conference tomorrow. They asked if you'd like to attend. Maya looked at the text, then typed slowly, "Yes, but I'll speak last." In the afternoon, golden sunlight streamed into the room. Online, news sites analyzed the story, experts commented, and talk shows dissected those 90 seconds. One journalist wrote, "History will probably remember Dr. Maya Trent not for what she said, but for what she didn't say." As night fell, Maya turned off the lights and sat by the window. The sound of cars drifted in the distance, blending with the gentle waves of the bay. She closed her eyes and remembered her mother's voice when she was little. "Never let anyone else decide where you belong." She smiled and whispered, "I've earned my place." Mom, somewhere out there, the world was still noisy, but in that room, Maya's silence once again made everything quiet down. Tomorrow, she will step before the camera, no longer as a victim, but as someone reminding the world that respect does not require permission. The next morning, the air in San Francisco was thick with morning dew. The city seemed to slow down as a crowd of reporters and supporters gathered outside the Federal Press Center. A sign reading, FAA Press Conference. Aria Air Flight 982 hung in the middle of the large glass building. Cameras were trained on the entrance, where Dr. Maya Trent would make her first public appearance since the crash, in the preparation room. Maya stood in front of the mirror. A simple black suit, no jewelry, no excessive makeup, only her eyes, still as calm as the night on the plane. Dominic Ray stood beside her, his voice low but full of worry. Maya, are you sure? Once you step out there, they won't leave you alone. Maya adjusted her collar and replied softly, I never thought they would leave me alone, but if I stay quiet, everything will go back to the way it was. Dominic looked at her and nodded. I'll be back in the stands. If you need anything, just give me a signal. She smiled and stepped into the hallway. Footsteps echoed softly on the stone floor, the clamor of reporters outside gradually growing louder. The door opened, and the flashbulbs flashed. Her name was called, hundreds of voices in a cacophony of voices. But Maya said nothing. She walked straight to the panel and sat down between Dominic and the FAA representative. The press conference began. An FAA spokesman spoke first, his voice stern. After an initial investigation, we have determined that Aria Air's data system was accessed without authorization 30 minutes before the flight. Some passenger information was altered, including the name of Dr. Maya Trent. He paused, his eyes on Maya. The investigation is ongoing to determine who is responsible. The room was buzzing. A reporter stood up and asked, Dr. Trent, what do you think about your name being removed from the first-class list? Maya took the microphone, her voice soft but powerful. I think this is more than just a data error. It's a reflection of how humans operate the system. Data doesn't change on its own. Someone wanted me out of my seat. The room was silent for a few seconds, then cameras flashed again. Another person asked, Some people say you deliberately used your control of your company's technology to create this incident. How do you respond? Maya did not shy away. I do not control anything. The system my company has built is designed to react automatically when there's misconduct. I do not give orders. I just sit back. That silenced the room. She looked up, staring directly into the cameras. Some people said I was too cold, that I should be angry. But if I was angry, all they would see was a black woman out of control. Instead, I stayed silent, and it was that silence that made them listen. The clicking of cameras became more frequent. A female reporter in the front row shouted, Do you feel like an icon? Maya smiled faintly. I don't want to be a symbol. I just want everyone to sit in their rightful place. At the back of the auditorium, Karen Hale stood quietly in the audience. Her hair was tied back, her face devoid of the usual meticulous makeup. As Maya spoke, Karen bowed her head, tears falling but not wiping them away. After an internal investigation, she was suspended. But this morning, she came here because she knew she needed to hear this for herself. As the press conference neared its end, a reporter asked a final question. Dr. Trent, what do you think needs to change most after this? Maya looked around, her voice low but clear. What needs to change is not in the data tables, but in the way we see each other. As long as people categorize each other using unconscious stereotypes, any system will continue to fail." She paused, then added, "I don't want to be praised. I want to be normal, and I want that for everyone." The room stood still for a few seconds. Then applause broke out, sporadic at first, then grew into a long round. Karen stood in the middle of the crowd, her hands shaking but still clapping. Maya bowed her head, not smiling, not crying. She just took a deep breath, feeling the fresh air flowing through the lighted room. When the press conference ended, Maya walked outside with Dominic. Outside, hundreds of people waited, many holding handwritten signs. "We see you. Hold your seat. And respect is not a privilege." A brown-skinned girl of about 12 pushed forward, holding a piece of paper with a yellow chair scribbled on it. "Dr. Trent, I have a gift for you." Maya bent down and took the paper. She raised her head, her eyes shining. "I want to grow up and be like you." Maya smiled, touching the girl's shoulder. "Don't be like me, be like you, but never leave your seat." Dominic watched the scene, silent. He knew his co-founder had weathered a storm, but also opened a new door. That afternoon, news of the press conference flooded the internet. A commentary in The Atlantic wrote, "Doctor, Maya Trent didn't shout slogans or pound on the table. She just sat there, and with that composure, she brought the system to its knees." In Horizon Shield's makeshift San Francisco office, Maya stood by the window overlooking the harbor. Dominic handed her a printed newspaper. "Look at this. The FAA just signed off on expanding Horizon Sentinel testing to the entire ARIA air fleet. They call it the first step toward responsible technology. You just changed national aviation policy." Maya put the newspaper down on the table, her voice low. "I don't want to change the policy. I just want them to understand that technology is not biased. People are—" Dominic chuckled. "And that's why people trust you." She turned to him, her eyes deep and warm. "They don't believe me. They believe what I make them see." In the evening, as the city lights came on, Maya returned to the hotel. She turned on the TV and saw herself at the press conference, the words scrolling across the screen. The woman who made silence speak. She turned off the screen and leaned back in her chair. The street lights filtered through the curtains, casting a half-light, half-shadow look on her face. In the silence, she took out her phone and opened the message from Karen. "Thank you. I will never look at anyone the same again." Maya typed back just 3 words. "That's enough." Outside, the waves of San Francisco Bay lapped gently against the shore. Maya closed her eyes and took a deep breath. A chapter was over, but her journey was not. Because she knows, no matter how loud the world gets, it still takes moments of silence strong enough to make it stop. 3 weeks after the press conference, Dr. Maya Trent's life was completely different. She couldn't leave her hotel room without being recognized. Every day, her inbox was flooded with thank you notes, speaking invitations, apologies, and angry messages. People wanted to hear what she had to say, but not everyone wanted to understand what she had to say. The media made her a new icon of justice. Others called her a social awakener. Maya knew the light never shines one way. One morning, Dominic walked into Horizon Shield's makeshift office, a newspaper in his hand. "Have you seen the new interview?" he said, setting it down on the table. The headline read in bold, "Karen Hale, I was wrong." Karen's photo appeared, her face gaunt, her eyes straight but sad. Maya glanced over. "She is brave." Dominic nodded. "She told me everything. She didn't shy away. She said you made her see herself. People were moved. Aurea Air asked her to come back after she completed her diversity training." Maya was silent for a moment, her eyes fixed on the window. "I'm happy for her, but I don't want them to just train. I want them to change the way they measure trust." Dominic understood what she meant. "You know, change is never quick, but at least this time, it starts with the truth." She chuckled, and with a first-class ticket, that afternoon, Maya had her first live interview since the incident with CNN. The host was Alyssa Monroe, a famous social media journalist. The studio was brightly lit, the atmosphere tense but professional. Alyssa opened with a warm voice. "Dr. Trent, millions of people see you as an icon, but in an old interview, you said that you don't want to be a poster child for progress. Can you elaborate?" Maya smiled softly, her voice low and even. "I don't want people to look at me and say, 'She did it, so we've changed.' I want them to look around and ask, 'What am I doing so that no one else has to suffer like she did?'" Alyssa nodded, her eyes filled with admiration. "What do you think made those 90 seconds so contagious? Because it was real." Maya replied. "There was no script, no speech, just a moment where the truth revealed itself. Everyone saw themselves in it, whoever they were, wherever they were." The interview lasted 40 minutes. When it ended, the studio audience stood up and applauded. A middle-aged woman approached her, tears in her eyes. "Thank you. My daughter is a trainee pilot. She said you gave her the confidence to stand in a cockpit and not have to apologize for the color of her skin." Maya squeezed her hand and said softly, "Tell her the world won't change until we dare sit where they say we shouldn't." That night, back at the hotel, Maya sat alone in the dark. The streetlights cast ripples of light on the ceiling. She turned on her laptop and read the new messages. One of them was from an unknown address, simply marked ML. She opened it. "You don't know me, but I'm the software engineer who first discovered someone tampering with passenger data. I reported it, but was told to keep quiet by my superiors. When your video went viral, I cried. Thank you for making the world hear what I was afraid to say." Maya read it over and over again, her hands shaking slightly. A small smile appeared on her lips, both sad and warm. She replied simply, "You are not silent. You're just waiting for the right person to listen." A few days later, Horizon Shield was invited to attend a national technology conference in Washington, D.C. This year's theme was Technology and Ethics in the Digital Age. When Maya stepped onto the stage, the crowd of over 1,000 people stood up to applaud. The spotlight shone on her face, but she did not read her prepared speech. "3 weeks ago," she began, "a system did what humans dare not tell the truth, but that system has no emotions. We do. And if humans don't learn to combine reason with compassion, technology will only be a mirror to our own errors." The room fell silent. Maya paused, then spoke more slowly. "I am not here to tell my story. I am here for the millions of people whose stories are not told. I want them to be seen, believed, and respected. That is not a privilege. That is a fundamental right." The applause did not come immediately after the speech. There was a standing ovation, then a burst of applause that lasted for nearly 2 minutes. Some wiped away tears, Others just stood there. It was no longer a cheer, it was a cry of solidarity. As Maya left the stage, she met Alyssa Monroe again. The journalist hugged her gently and whispered, "They will be talking about this speech for years to come." Maya smiled. "If they remember. I hope they remember the message, not my name." That evening, she and Dominic sat together at a small cafe near the hotel. The air was warm. The smell of baked goods filled the air. Dominic raised his glass, half joking, half serious. "You know, I used to think you were just a security system builder. Now you've reactivated the trust of the whole society." Maya smiled, her eyes sparkling in the yellow light. Trust needs to be encoded. Dominic, not by algorithms, but by actions. They were silent for a moment. Outside, a light rain had begun to fall. The lights reflected off the wet pavement, shimmering like fragments of memory. Maya spoke softly, as if to herself, everyone has their own flight. And on that flight, what matters is not where you sit, but how you choose to face someone who tells you that you don't belong there. The words hung in the air, as quiet as the last note of a concert. Dominic looked at her, his eyes filled with pride and respect. "You will rewrite history." "Maya." She shook her head, her voice light as the wind. "No, I just want to rewrite the way people treat each other." That night, when she returned to her room, the rain was still falling outside. Maya opened the window and took a deep breath of the cold air. The lights of the city reflected in her eyes, peaceful but determined. She knew this journey was not over, but for the first time in years, she felt her heart lighten, because she understood silence was no longer a burden, but a guide and light. 2 months later, San Francisco is spring. The sky is pale blue, the light soft and clear as glass. Inside, Horizon Shield's new headquarters. Dr. Maya Trent is walking among the rows of employees. The room is large. The glass walls look out onto the bay. The air is fresh and full of energy. Posters hanging along the hallways read, "Technology with Integrity." Today is the first day the company has launched its Horizon Fellowship program, a scholarship for women of color in the field of security technology. Maya stood on a small stage, microphone in hand. "I've sat in rooms where no one thought I belonged," she began, her voice soft, "and I know what that feels like. But today, I want everyone here to remember that you don't need permission to sit down. You just need to believe that you deserve that seat." The room fell silent, then burst into applause. In the front row, a group of young students stood up, their eyes shining. A petite girl named Ayanna from Texas whispered to a friend, "She makes me believe anything is possible." After the ceremony, Maya stepped out into the balcony. Dominic Ray brought her coffee. "A new beginning," he said, leaning against the railing. "Not just for me," Maya replied, looking away. "For everyone who has ever been forced to stand when they should have sat." Dominic smiled. "You always know how to turn a personal moment into a lesson for the world." She shrugged. "I'm not trying to teach anyone. I'm just sharing what I've learned, the price I paid." Maya's phone rang. The screen read, "Aurea Air PR Office." She picked up, and the voice on the other end was the new female director of the company. "Dr. Trent, I'd like to invite you to the launch of Seat for All. This is our new initiative, inspired by your story. Would you like to come and speak?" Maya was silent for a few seconds, then replied, "I will come, but only if one other person is also present. Karen Hale. The woman on the other end of the line looked a little surprised, then agreed. We would be honored. A few weeks later, the ceremony was held at JFK Airport in New York. The media was again swarming. A large banner read, "Seat for All," a commitment to fair flight. Maya appeared in a white suit, looking composed, while Karen Hale stood beside her, casual in her new uniform. When the two took the stage together, the crowd fell silent. No one expected them to stand next to each other after what had happened. The host asked Maya to speak. She stepped up to the microphone, the light gently illuminating her face. "I used to think I would never go back to first class again, not because I was afraid, but because I wanted to forget. But then I realized you can't heal by avoiding. You can only heal by going back to where it all began, with a changed heart." She turned to Karen, her eyes softening. "I am not standing here alone today. Neither is Karen. We have both learned that sometimes fairness is not about someone winning, but about everyone understanding." Karen took the microphone, her voice trembling slightly. "That day, I thought I was doing the right thing. I was trained to be skeptical, to put rules before people. But I was wrong, and that mistake cost me more than my job. It cost me my own faith. Thank you, Maya, for being silent when I didn't deserve to hear anything. It was your silence that made me listen." Applause broke out, and many were in tears. Dominic stood in the audience, his eyes shining. He knew Maya wasn't just talking about a flight, but about how people learn to see each other more truly. After the ceremony, a reporter approached Maya and asked, "Do you think you have forgiven the past?" Maya smiled, her eyes deep and calm. "Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It just means I don't want to carry it on the next flight." She left the stage, Karen beside her. They didn't say much, but the silence between them was different now. It wasn't distance, it was respect. On the way to the car, Maya looked around. The new Oria Air billboards showed a diverse group of passengers, with the words, "Everyone deserves a seat." She smiled. Sometimes, just one empty seat can make a world of difference. That evening, back at her hotel in Manhattan, Maya opened her laptop and wrote the first lines of the book Dominic had told her she should write. She typed the title onto the blank page, 90 Seconds of Silence, The Seat That Spoke. She paused, looking out the window at the still-lit city. A sense of peace spread through her. No more anger, no more pressure to prove anything. Just a firm belief that her story had served its purpose, to open up other stories. Late at night, Maya received a text message from Ayanna, the little student from the previous ceremony. "Ms. Trent, I was accepted into the internship program today. Thank you for making me dare to dream." Maya read it and smiled. She typed back, "Dreaming is the first step. Sitting down and doing is the next step." Outside, a light rain was falling in New York. Maya turned off the lights and left her laptop open, the white light reflecting off her face. In the silence, she said to herself, "Maybe this is how justice begins, with a small story. One person daring to sit still, and a world stopping to watch. And somewhere, among the millions of videos on the internet, that 90-second clip is still shared every day." But now, it is no longer a moment of controversy, but a gentle reminder that justice does not need to scream. Sometimes, it just needs to be quiet enough for others to hear the beat of truth. That summer, San Francisco shone brighter than ever. Horizon Shield was no longer just a tech company, but a symbol of trust and transparency. Large corporations were coming to partner with her, and universities were inviting Maya Trent to teach. But amid all the lights and accolades, Maya maintained the same simple pace of life. Every morning, she would wake up at 6, make a cup of ginger tea, open the window to let in the breeze, and spend 15 minutes watching the city wake up. It was her silence, the one thing she could never lose. One morning, as the sunlight was pouring into the room, Dominic walked in with a stack of files. "You have a few new offers," he said. "TED Talk, Harvard, and even a memoir offer from Random House. They said they were willing to pay $500,000 up front." Maya raised an eyebrow, her voice calm. $500,000 for a story they thought was over? Dominic laughed. "You know, most people would consider that a happy ending." "As for me," she replied, looking out the window, "I see it only as the beginning of responsibility." He was silent, then said slowly, "You never know how to enjoy success." Maya turned back, smiling slightly. "Maybe because I don't see it as my own." That afternoon, Maya visited the institute where Horizon Shield was funding a new research lab. In the lab, Ayanna, the young student who had texted Maya, was standing at a computer screen, her face full of excitement. "Dr. Trent, we're testing an AI model that detects bias in hiring data. If successful, it could help eliminate gender and racial bias in automated screening of resumes." Maya looked at the young girl with pride in her eyes. "You did well. But remember, technology is just a tool. What makes it fair is the heart of the programmer." Ayanna nodded vigorously, her smile widening. "I won't forget." Leaving the lab, Maya stood in the hallway, looking through the glass. She saw her reflection, a woman who had once been denied a place, now helping thousands find theirs. In that moment, she felt no pride or vanity, only peace. The kind of peace that comes from knowing that an old wound was no longer an end, but a beginning for someone else. That evening, when Maya returned home, she received a call from Karen Hale. "Maya, I just completed my first training session for new flight attendants. I used your videos as my teaching material." Maya laughed. How did they react at first? They were quiet. Then one of them said, "I used to think discrimination was just something else, not something I was dealing with." And then they started sharing. I've never seen them be so honest. "So you created what we were hoping for," Maya said, "a conversation." Karen was silent for a few seconds and then said softly, "Thank you for not hating me." Maya replied, her voice as soft as a breath, "You don't need my forgiveness. You just need to keep doing the right thing. That's enough." After the call, Maya sat back on the sofa, the yellow light illuminating her black hair streaked with silver. She thought of her mother, who had worked as a nurse in a small hospital in Atlanta. "You can lose everything, but never lose kindness," she had said. The words echoed in her head now, like a thread connecting everything she had been through. The next day, Maya flew to New York for the first Horizon Fellowship graduation. When she walked into the auditorium, hundreds of students stood up and applauded. A sea of diverse faces, smiling with pride. Ayanna spoke on behalf of the students. "If it weren't for Trent, we might still think we had to ask permission to sit at that table," she said, her voice shaky but firm. "Now we know that sometimes the right thing to do is sit down and start." Maya sat in the front row, hanging on every word. When the program ended, Ayanna ran down and hugged her tightly. "You're the reason I chose this major." Maya hugged him back and whispered, "No. Ayana, you are the reason I believe I am on the right path." That evening, Maya sat by the hotel window, looking out at the city. The lights of New York City were like fallen stars. She opened her laptop and continued writing the book she had started months before. A new page appeared, and she typed slowly. "I used to think 90 seconds was a small moment, but it turns out it's long enough to stop the world." She paused, smiled. Beneath, she continued, "If you've ever been told this isn't your place, don't walk away. Sit down, breathe, and let the world learn to treat you right again." The window was open, and the night breeze rushed in, carrying with it the sounds of traffic and distant horns. Maya closed her eyes and listened. In that silence, she felt something deeper than victory healing, not just hers, but the healing of so many others. When the clock struck midnight, she turned off her computer and stood up. On her desk, an old photo of her mother was placed next to a small frame that read, "Respect is the quietest revolution." She touched the words lightly and smiled. "I get it, Mom." The next morning, as Maya was leaving the hotel, the manager ran up to her and handed her a letter. "Someone sent it to you last night." She opened the envelope. Inside was a first-class airline ticket with a handwritten note attached. "We saved your seat." There was no signature, but Maya knew who sent it. Karen. She looked at the ticket and smiled softly. She had no intention of flying, but she kept the ticket anyway. Not as a souvenir, but as a symbol. A reminder that sometimes justice begins with just one person sitting down and not leaving. She stepped outside, the morning light flooding in. The city was as noisy as ever, but inside Maya, everything was quiet. No more fear, no more anger, just gratitude for those who had been wrong, who had been right, who had been silent, who had dared to speak up. And in that silence, she knew her journey was not over, because there were still empty chairs out there waiting for someone brave enough to sit down. Autumn came with a thin chill, seeping through the glass doors of the Horizon Shield office. Outside, the maple trees turned orange and red, leaves falling gently on the gravel path. Inside, Maya Trent sat alone, her computer screen half open, the words Chapter 12. The silence that spoke back blinked, waiting to be written. But today, she couldn't write. There was a knock on the door, and Dominic entered, holding a brown envelope. "Hand delivered for you. From Atlanta," he said. "No return address." Maya took it, her eyes slightly downcast. She opened the envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter. The paper was yellowed. The first line made her heart stop. "To Maya, my daughter." She paused. The soft, slanted handwriting was her mother's. It had been written before she died, years ago. She had never known it existed. Dominic had walked away quietly, leaving her alone. Maya opened the letter. "If you're reading this, it means I am gone. My child, I know the world will not be easy for you, especially when you have two things that people fear: your mind and your skin. Someday, someone will make you stand up just to prove that you are worthy of sitting down. But I hope you will not let anger guide you. Let kindness be your guide. Because justice without kindness is just another form of power." A tear fell onto the corner of the paper. Maya continued reading, her voice whispering in the quiet room. "I always believe that you will not only change your life, but also make others want to be better. And when you are tired, remember that even silence has a voice, if you listen." The letter ended with a shaky line. Love you, Mom. Maya closed the letter and hugged it to her chest. She closed her eyes, and for a moment, she seemed to hear her mother's voice echoing softly in her mind. A sense of peace filled her. That evening, Maya went to Pacifica Beach, where she always went when she needed peace and quiet. The sky was gray, the wind salty. She took off her shoes and stepped onto the wet sand. In the distance, waves lapped against the shore, each wave as steady as the ocean's breath. Dominic called. Are you okay? Fine, Maya replied. I just received a letter from the past. Is it your mother's yes? Her voice was soft. You always knew what I needed to hear, even when you weren't here. There was a moment of silence on the other end. Then Dominic said, Do you know you did what she wanted? Maya smiled. I think I'm still on my way. They were silent, listening only to the waves. Then Maya spoke softly. Dominic, I think it's time we roll out Horizon Shield globally, not just to protect data, but to protect trust. There are too many systems that decide people's fate without people in them. He laughed, his voice tinged with emotion. Are you about to rewrite the rules of this world? No, she replied. I just want to rewrite the way people treat technology and each other. A few months later, Horizon Shield announced Equinet, a global network to ensure data fairness in hiring and credit rating algorithms. The press called it an ethical revolution in technology. Maya kept a low profile. Instead, she sat behind the scenes, mentoring teams of young professionals, listening and editing every sentence in the mission statement. Late one evening, Ayana walked into the office. Dr. Trent, everyone is waiting for you in the conference room. They want you to speak at the project launch. Maya shook her head. No need. Today is yours. Ayana squeezed her hand gently. But we wouldn't be here today without you. Maya looked at the young girl, her eyes soft but determined. If I did anything right, it was helping you believe in yourself. The rest you can do on your own. When Ayana left, Maya sat back, looking at the letter her mother had placed in a glass frame on the table. I have learned, Mother, she whispered, that justice comes not from grand speeches, but from small actions repeated every day. The day the project launched, the auditorium was packed. Big screens showed images of young people from all over, Africa, Asia, Europe, joining the Equinet network. When the speech ended, Ayana took the stage, holding a sign that read, Equality is not a seat, it's a system. The crowd erupted in applause. Maya stood in the back row, her eyes brimming with tears. After the event, she left the hall alone. On her way, she passed San Francisco International Airport. In the lobby, a new Aria Air billboard appeared, a smiling black woman sitting in first class, with the words, Every seat tells a story underneath. She stopped, smiling slightly. She knew the journey had come full circle, not in victory, but in understanding, not in noise, but in silence. That night, Maya returned home, sat at her desk, opened her laptop, and began writing the final chapter of her book. I'm not writing this to tell you what happened, but to remind you that justice is not a destination. It's a journey we have to choose anew every day, and sometimes that journey begins with not standing up when someone tells you you don't belong. When she finished writing, she looked out the window. The moonlight spread evenly over the city, quiet and soft. Maya gently placed her hand on the letter in the glass frame. Mother, My silence has finally been heard, and in the small room, only the sounds of the night remained, quiet but full of life. One winter morning, the Golden Gate Bridge was covered in fog. Cars drove slowly, their headlights casting long streaks of light as if searching through a sea of white smoke. On the top floor of Horizon Shield, Maya Trent stood before a large glass panel, looking down at the still sleepy city. She was preparing for a trip to Geneva, where she'd been invited to speak at the Global Conference on Ethics and Artificial Intelligence. Dominic entered, carrying 2 cups of coffee. He placed one in front of her, smiling. "I guess you're talking about fairness today." Maya chuckled. "No, I'm talking about listening today. About how we let too many systems learn to judge before they learn to understand." Dominic was silent for a moment, then said, "You know, sometimes I think those 90 seconds changed more than 10 years of policy." She replied, her voice soft and deep, because it wasn't just 90 seconds. It was 90 years of being held back, finally finding a voice. That afternoon, they flew to Geneva on the plane. Maya sat in first class, the seat she had been denied before. This time, she found there was no bitterness. There was only silence. When the flight attendant asked what she would like to drink, Maya looked at the young woman in the blue uniform and said, "I'm fine. Thanks." She smiled, and the flight attendant returned her smile with a genuine one. It was a simple moment, but for Maya, it was proof that the world was changing, albeit slowly. In Geneva, the hall was vast, high-ceilinged, and softly lit. The audience was filled with hundreds of technologists, ethicists, politicians, and students. Maya took the stage, her gait steady but unassuming. She began her talk with an old story, not about the flight, but about the chairs in the conference room, those seemingly ordinary seats that determine who gets a say. We live in a time where lines of code can decide who gets interviewed, who gets loans, who gets arrested, but those lines of code are written by people, and if the people who write them don't learn to listen, the system will never be fair. Her voice is deep and clear, each word etched into space. I was told this wasn't for me, but what made me stronger wasn't that I sat down. It was that I didn't leave, because when you don't leave, the world is forced to face itself. The room fell silent. Maya paused for a few seconds and continued. Equality is not about having the same seat, but about having the same opportunity to be heard. If technology can make us see each other as people instead of numbers, that is true progress. The speech ended with thunderous applause. A young Kenyan student approached and shyly asked for a photo. "Dr. Trent, I saw your videos when I was 15. It made me choose to study AI to protect the vulnerable." Maya smiled, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Then keep going. The world needs more people like you." That evening, Maya and Dominic sat at a small cafe on the shore of Lake Geneva. The air was chilly, the lights reflecting off the shimmering water. Dominic raised his glass of wine. "You know, when I saw you on stage today, I thought your mother would be proud if she were still alive." Maya tilted her head slightly. "I think so too, but she would remind me never to forget why I started." Dominic smiled. "And why did you start?" She looked out at the lake, her voice quiet. "Because I can't stand seeing people stay silent, even if they have a reason. They sat there for a long time without saying anything more. There was only the sound of the wind and the water lapping against the shore." The next morning, Maya received an email from Karen Hale. "Maya, I'm starting a new training class for other airlines. I'd like to call it the 90-second lesson. Is that okay with you?" Maya read it and smiled. "Nice name." "Karen," she replied, "but let them remember. The real lesson isn't in 90 seconds. It's in how we choose to behave in the 91st second." The day she returned to the United States, as the plane landed in San Francisco. Maya looked out the window. The sunlight reflected off the bay like a shimmering gold ribbon. She felt as if a new chapter was opening, not for her, but for the world. At the office, Ayana and the Equinet team greeted her with good news. The project had been recognized by the United Nations as a model for ethical AI. The team cheered and hugged each other in joy. Maya just smiled, her eyes welling up. "You did it," she said. "Remember, fairness is not a reward. It's a responsibility." That night, Maya returned home and hung the photo of the Equinet team next to her mother's letter. She lit a small candle, the flame casting a warm, soft glow on the wall. She sat down and opened a notebook. On the blank page, she wrote, "We cannot change the past, but we can rewrite how it is told. And every time someone sits down, history is written a new chapter." She closed the notebook and leaned back in her chair. Outside, it had begun to rain. Raindrops tapped softly against the window, reminding her that every journey requires silence. Maya closed her eyes and let the sound lull her. The next morning, as the dawn broke through the curtains, she stood up and looked at her mother's photograph. "Mother," she whispered, "I kept my promise. I didn't leave." And in that moment, she understood that her journey was never about the chair or the 90 seconds. It was about how one person chose to stand still in the midst of chaos, and then made the world learn to listen. A year after her speech in Geneva, Dr. Maya Trent's life seemed to have taken a new turn. Horizon Shield was thriving, and the Equinet project had expanded to 14 countries. But amid the storm of success, Maya still chose a slower pace. Every morning, she brewed a cup of peppermint tea, opened the windows, and let the sounds of the city flow into her small San Francisco apartment. She no longer appeared in the media as often, but her name was mentioned more than ever, in classes, conferences, and inspirational videos online. One evening, Ayana visited her with her young Equinet team. They brought laptops, excited to present their new project. "Dr. Trent, we want to produce a documentary about your journey, from that moment on the plane to today, not to glorify you, but to document how one person can turn vulnerability into strength." Maya looked at the young faces. Their eyes lit up like fire. She smiled. "If you want to tell that story, don't tell it about me. Tell it about the people who changed because of it. Because what matters is not who was denied first class, but who learned to stop saying no." The room was silent. Ayana nodded. "Then we'll tell the stories of the people who were inspired by it." Maya put her hand on the young girl's shoulder. "Good. Let's make it everyone's story." 2 months later, the documentary The Seat That Spoke was released. The project featured not only Maya, but also people who had been discriminated against: airline employees, programmers, students, even Karen Hale. The film premiered at the New York International Film Festival. When the last line appeared, the auditorium fell silent. No one applauded right away. They just sat there, silent. Then the applause came, steady, real. Maya sat in the back row, saying nothing. She looked up at the screen, where Karen's face appeared, and said through tears that day, I didn't just see a passenger. I saw a mirror, a reflection of myself I didn't dare look at. After the screening, Ayana walked over to Maya. People are looking for you. They want to take pictures. Maya shook her head. This is your moment. Just let me sit here. She smiled, watching the audience leave the theater, many stopping to wipe away tears. When the theater was empty, Karen walked over. I saw this movie 3 times before it started, but today, seeing their reactions, I finally understood. Maya asked softly. Understood what Karen replied, her voice as light as the wind. That forgiveness is not about forgetting the past, but about giving the present a better chance. Maya nodded. You're right. They sat side by side, no longer any distance between them. They both looked up at the blank screen, where the words inspired by true events faded in the light. Karen smiled. The world has heard your story. Are you relieved? Maya was silent for a moment, then said, I don't want the world to just hear. I want them to tell. In the months that followed, the film went viral. Schools showed it in ethics classes. Airlines hired Karen and Maya as training consultants. Horizon Shield received countless thank you notes from people who had experienced discrimination but never had a voice. One afternoon, as Maya was leaving her office, a middle-aged white woman approached her. Dr. Trent, I'm the wife of the pilot on that flight. He saw the movie. Since then, he has been saying that he should have spoken up. He told me to tell you, thank you for speaking up for those who remain silent like you. Maya took the woman's hand. Thank you for saying that. Silence has its price, but sometimes just one word is enough to make up for it. That night, Maya returned to her apartment and turned on the television. A news channel was broadcasting a story about changes in the airline industry from employee training procedures to customer rating systems. The headline read, Seat for All becomes the new standard across 30 airlines. She chuckled in the corner of the frame. Karen stood before a class, instructing new students. Her voice boomed through the speakers. Sometimes, if you look at someone for just 2 seconds longer, they're not that different from you. Maya turned off the TV, stood up, and walked out onto the balcony. The cold wind blew through her hair, carrying the scent of salt from afar. She looked down at the street, where people were still hurrying. Her mother's words echoed in her head. Don't let justice turn you into a cold person. She smiled slightly and whispered, I understand. Mom. A week later, Maya accepted an invitation to be the honorary speaker at Stanford University's commencement ceremony. When she stepped onto the stage, the room fell silent. Thousands of students looked up, waiting. Maya spoke slowly, each word clearly, as if telling a story. Years ago, I was told that my seat was a flaw in the system. Today, I say to you, if the world tells you that you are sitting in the wrong seat, ask them why that seat exists. The audience laughed, then applauded. Maya smiled, her eyes shining, and, if you have the right to sit down, pull out a chair for someone else. As she left the stage, Ayana ran up and hugged her. You just brought the whole place to its feet. Maya replied, her voice soft as a breath. If they stand up to do something, that's all that matters. In the evening, Maya went home, opened her laptop, and continued writing the final part of her book. The Seat That Spoke. She typed the last lines. All stories have endings, but justice does not. It lives in every choice, every look, every time we stop to listen. And if you are sitting, make sure the person next to you has a chair too. She left the manuscript behind, leaned back in her chair, and smiled softly. The city lights illuminated her face. Peaceful. In that small room, there was a very soft sound, a silence, but warm, as if the past and present were merging into one. 2 years later, San Francisco has changed. New buildings have sprung up, and Horizon Shield has become America's leading technology corporation. But while her company's name is plastered across the charts, Maya Trent still keeps her old routine, taking a morning walk, carrying a small notebook and pen, jotting down brief thoughts about the world. She once told Ayanna that writing is the only way she can maintain her balance between noise and silence. Today, she has a meeting with the International Advisory Group for Equinet. Dominic is waiting for her in the lobby. When she walks out, he smiles. You know, they call you the ethics reshaper of the AI age. Maya replies softly, I'm not reshaping anything. I'm just reminding them that behind every line of code there is a heart. The meeting lasted nearly 3 hours. Experts from Europe, Africa, and Asia joined via video conference. They talked about data fairness, privacy, and the responsibility of artificial intelligence. Maya listened, taking careful notes. When the meeting ended, she said a sentence that silenced the room. If an algorithm cannot recognize human dignity, it is not intelligent enough to be called intelligent. People looked at her and nodded. The sentence was later shared all over social media. In the afternoon, Maya left the office and drove to her old school in Oakland, where she had attended school as a child. Today was the grand opening of the Maya Trent Community Technology Center, a project she had funded. On stage, children of color, Latinos, and Asians stood in line, their eyes shining. When Maya stepped forward, the crowd cheered. When I was your age, I never thought I could work with a computer, because I didn't see anyone who looked like me in that classroom, she said in a warm, simple voice. Today, I want you to know that your place is wherever you want to be. No one has the right to say otherwise. The schoolyard erupted in applause and cheers. A little girl ran up and handed her a hand-drawn card. Ms. Maya, I want to be an inventor like you. She bent down, stroked her head, and whispered, So start by believing you can. That evening, Maya joined Dominic and Ayanna for dinner at a small restaurant near the harbor. They talked about the years, about the movie, about Equinet, about the things that seemed so far away but had now come true. Dominic raised his glass, his eyes soft. You know, Maya, I think your mother would be very proud. Not just because you've succeeded, but because you've changed others for the better. Maya smiled, her gaze distant. I'm just continuing what she started. My mother used to say, if you can't change the world, start with the person in front of you. And maybe that's how all real change begins. Ayanna placed her hands on the table, her voice filled with emotion. I've been invited to Washington. They want me to lead a national AI ethics study. Maya looked at her, smiling proudly. So, the next journey begins. Remember, don't just talk about fairness, make people feel it. Ayanna nodded slightly, tears welling in her eyes. A few weeks later, Maya received an invitation from the United Nations. They wanted her to speak at the Global Forum on Trust and Dignity in the Digital Age. The event brought together world leaders, scientists, and the biggest tech companies. This is a stage everyone dreams of. Dominic joked, I just hope I can hold their attention for more than 90 seconds. Maya replied. On the day of the conference, the UN auditorium was packed. Maya stepped onto the podium, wearing a dark blue suit, the lights shining down on her, making her look both strong and calm. She opened her speech with a slow, steady voice that echoed throughout the large space. 2 years ago, I was asked what makes change. I answered, not shouting, but silence that knows how to speak at the right time. Today, I want to say the world cannot sit still. It is time for us to sit down together. She paused for a few seconds, her eyes scanning the room. Every line of code, every decision made by technology is a reflection of humanity. If we don't learn to treat each other with dignity, any system of fairness is an illusion. She took a deep breath, her voice deep and steady. I was denied a seat, but from that moment, I understood that fairness isn't about getting a better seat. It's about people sitting together without fear. If we can bring that spirit to the digital world, then there's a future to believe in. When she finished, the audience rose to their feet, applauding loudly. The camera caught Maya bowing her head, her eyes welling up. In the front row, Dominic and Ayanna stood together, looking at her with undisguised pride. That evening, Maya returned to her hotel in Manhattan and sat alone by the window, looking out at the city, the light reflected in her eyes, warm and deep. She opened a small notebook and wrote the last lines. Fairness is not a reward, but a habit of the heart. When we learn to see others as we see ourselves, the world will sit still. She closed the notebook and looked up at the night sky. Outside, the rain began to fall. Drops rolled down the window panes, reflecting the city lights like countless stars. Maya spoke softly, almost in a whisper. Mother, I think I found what you wanted me to see, peace and justice. And in that moment, the world truly sat still. Not in a room or a conference, but in the hearts of once silent people who had learned to speak. The story Black Woman, CEO denied first-class seat. First class melts down in 90 seconds is not just about discrimination or injustice, but about a person's journey to regain dignity in a world that is quick to judge. Maya Trent chose to remain silent. Not because she was weak, but because she understood that sometimes silence speaks louder than 1,000 excuses. She teaches us that justice is not about sitting in a better seat, but when people can sit next to each other with respect. The biggest lesson from this story is stay kind. Even when the world isn't treating you fairly, don't let anger turn you into what you're fighting against. Everyone has their own seat in life. It's about daring to sit firmly, daring to believe in your own worth, and daring to make the world take a look. If you've ever experienced feeling judged, doubted, or left out, hopefully this story will show you that silence at the right time can be the most powerful voice. Thank you for listening and accompanying this story.